Arjun Malhotra, a brilliant Indian doctor turned fraud mastermind, and Sophie Turner, the scorned lover who exposed his darkest secret, became the central figures in one of the most shocking visa scams in the UK, a story of greed, betrayal, and a tragic end no one saw coming. Dr. Arjun Malhotra was only 42 when he arrived in the United Kingdom, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had already conquered life. To neighbors and colleagues, he seemed like the perfect success story. He was an Indian doctor with a flawless academic record, degrees from prestigious universities, and a talent for impressing anyone he met. Within months of settling in London, his life transformed into something many only dreamed of. He drove a sleek black BMW, wore designer suits, and lived in a glass-walled apartment that overlooked the Thames. At medical conferences, he was always the one speaking on stage, his polished accent and charming presence captivating the audience. Patients adored him, colleagues respected him, and the community saw him as an example of how hard work could change a life. Yet, behind the curtain of admiration, Arjun was already laying the foundations of a dangerous empire. The truth was that Arjun had realized early on that his medical salary, while comfortable, would never fund the lifestyle he craved. He wanted wealth, not stability. He wanted power, not just respect. And so, he discovered an opportunity that few would dare to touch. He began building a network that thrived on desperation. People from India who longed for British residency and were willing to pay fortunes for it, and people in the UK who were struggling so badly that a quick payoff sounded like salvation. Arjun found a way to connect these two groups, creating marriages that existed only on paper. For every fake wedding he arranged, he charged his clients more than £100,000. Most of them came from wealthy families in India, where parents were desperate to see their sons or daughters settle abroad. To make the illusion convincing, Arjun orchestrated every detail: photographs, ceremonies, documents, and even staged love stories. The British spouses he recruited were often addicts, gamblers, or people drowning in debt. For them, the money was life-changing. For Arjun, it was just another brick in the palace of lies he was constructing. By the time 4 years had passed, he had quietly earned over £3 million. No one suspected him because on the surface, he was still the same celebrated doctor saving lives in hospitals. But his glamorous social media posts, filled with exotic holidays and expensive gifts, hinted at something more. Friends whispered about his sudden rise, but no one dared to question him directly. Arjun had mastered the art of keeping two lives perfectly balanced, the respected physician by day and the millionaire fraudster by night. It was a balance that made him untouchable, or so he believed. Arjun's secret operation was as precise as a surgical procedure, and every move was calculated to avoid suspicion. He had a keen eye for spotting vulnerability in people. In the UK, he would visit local bars, run-down neighborhoods, and even hospital wards where patients often shared stories of financial ruin. Those who owed money to loan sharks or struggled with addiction became his perfect recruits. He offered them an escape from their misery, a quick pay out in exchange for becoming the legal spouse of someone they had never met before. To most, it sounded too good to be true, but the promise of tens of thousands of pounds was enough to make them overlook the risks. Once they agreed, Arjun took full control, ensuring every step looked authentic. He maintained a network of forgers who could produce marriage certificates, bank statements, and rental agreements. Each fake couple was coached to answer immigration interview questions flawlessly. He even staged photographs of the newlyweds, smiling in front of landmarks, cutting cakes at fake receptions, and holding hands in parks for the benefit of official records. If neighbors ever asked, Arjun instructed them to say the couple worked odd hours or traveled frequently, keeping suspicion away. To anyone on the outside, the marriages appeared real. Inside his hidden network, however, they were nothing but financial transactions. His clients from India were equally desperate in their own way. Many were from wealthy families but lacked the right visas to stay in the UK. For them, paying Arjun meant skipping years of uncertainty and paperwork. They trusted him because he wore the mask of a respectable doctor. His medical profession gave him credibility, and no one questioned how a man so accomplished could be running an illegal operation. Arjun's confidence grew with every successful case. He would often brag privately that his system was flawless, built on human weakness and greed. With each deal, his bank accounts swelled, and his taste for luxury deepened. He upgraded from a BMW to a Jaguar, bought expensive watches, and hosted glamorous parties that blended his worlds of medicine and crime seamlessly. But there was one weakness in his empire that he could not control: his personal relationships. Arjun was a man of indulgence, not only in wealth but also in women. He charmed nurses, socialites, and even patients' relatives, leaving behind a trail of broken hearts. Among them was Sophie Turner, a woman who once believed she had a future with him. She had been his companion during his early days in the UK, when his empire was just beginning to form. What Arjun did not realize was that Sophie still watched his every move, and her heartbreak would one day become the sharpest weapon against him. Sophie Turner had once been enchanted by Arjun's charisma. When they first met, she was drawn to his ambition, his polished manners, and the promise of a stable future with a successful doctor. For a time, she believed his words, imagining herself building a life alongside him. But as Arjun's wealth and influence grew, his affection for Sophie began to fade. He distanced himself, offering excuses about long hours at the hospital or urgent travel, while surrounding himself with new women who were younger, wealthier, or more glamorous. Sophie's texts went unanswered, her calls ignored, until she realized that the man she had loved had moved on without a thought. What hurt even more was seeing him flaunt his new companions, parading them at parties and vacations, as if she had never existed. At first, Sophie tried to bury the pain. She told herself he would eventually return, that his behavior was just a phase. But her quiet hope was crushed when she accidentally stumbled upon evidence of the life he truly lived. One evening, while collecting belongings she had left at his flat, Sophie discovered a hidden folder of documents stuffed inside a desk drawer. Inside were bank transfer receipts, lists of names, staged photographs of strangers posing as couples, and multiple forged certificates. The picture was clear. Arjun was running a massive scam under the guise of his respectable profession. Shock quickly turned into a storm of emotions. Betrayal cut the deepest, but jealousy added fuel to her anger. Not only had he discarded her, but he had also built his empire on lies while treating her as nothing more than a disposable companion. In those documents, Sophie saw her chance for revenge. She carefully copied files, photographed receipts, and took screenshots of incriminating messages she found on his laptop. Rather than confront him directly, she chose a colder, more destructive path. Sophie contacted the immigration authorities anonymously, presenting them with everything she had collected. She knew exactly what she was unleashing. The information she handed over exposed not just Arjun, but also his network of forgers, accomplices, and clients. Within weeks, the first ripples of investigation began to shake his carefully constructed empire. What Sophie had set in motion was no longer in her control. Soon, news channels reported shocking details about a respected doctor at the center of a marriage visa scam worth millions. Arjun's perfect world was beginning to crack, and the woman he had cast aside had just pulled the first thread that would unravel it all. When the authorities finally acted, Arjun's downfall was swift and merciless. Immigration officers, financial investigators, and police arrived at his luxury apartment one early morning, armed with warrants and determination. They combed through every corner of his home, uncovering luxury watches, stacks of cash hidden in drawers, and a safe filled with fake passports. His expensive Jaguar was towed away as evidence of his unexplained wealth. Neighbors who had once admired his success now watched in stunned silence as their glamorous doctor was led away under the flashing lights of police vehicles. The image of respectability he had carefully polished was gone in an instant, replaced by headlines branding him a fraudster. The investigation painted a damning picture. Authorities uncovered over 30 sham marriages, each backed by forged documents and staged ceremonies. Interviews with participants revealed how Arjun had exploited people's desperation, paying some of them just enough to risk prison themselves. The prosecution's case was airtight, bolstered by the very documents Sophie had delivered. Each discovery dug the hole deeper, leaving Arjun with no plausible defense. His medical employers suspended him immediately, stripping him of the career he had spent years building. Friends who had once dined at his table stopped answering his calls, fearful of being associated with him. Even his family back in India, once proud of his achievements, withdrew into silence as shame spread across their community. Arjun's fortune, which had taken years to accumulate, crumbled overnight. Bank accounts were frozen, properties seized, and assets placed under investigation for money laundering. Every corner he turned, he found only walls closing in. He hired top lawyers, but even they admitted privately that there was little hope of escaping conviction. His trial, scheduled to begin within months, promised not just prison but also permanent disgrace. The isolation was unbearable. Those who had once relied on him for money and influence had vanished. His lovers disappeared without trace, leaving him to face the consequences alone. For the first time, Arjun felt powerless, no longer the man who manipulated others to build his kingdom. Fear gripped him every night as he lay awake, imagining the years he would spend behind bars and the ridicule his name would forever carry. Betrayal had started his fall, but now it was the weight of his own choices crushing him. In the quiet of his empty apartment, stripped of the luxury he once flaunted, Arjun realized that no amount of money could buy him freedom from the storm that was consuming his life. On the evening before his first court appearance, Arjun checked into a luxury hotel in central London, choosing the most expensive suite, as though clinging to the last symbol of the life he had lost. Surveillance footage captured him arriving alone, carrying only a small overnight bag. He looked calm, almost detached, but beneath the surface his mind was consumed with despair. The world that had once adored him now viewed him as a criminal, and the thought of standing in a courtroom to hear his crimes read aloud was more than he could bear. His empire was gone, his career destroyed, and his name forever tarnished. He had nothing left to fight for, and in that emptiness he made his final decision. Through the night, Arjun sat at the polished desk of the hotel suite, writing a note with shaky hands. The words were bitter, filled with anger and blame. He accused Sophie of betrayal, condemning her as the reason for his downfall, and wrote that without her interference he would still be untouchable. Yet the note also revealed flashes of regret. He admitted that greed had driven him too far, that his hunger for wealth and status had blinded him to the dangers of his own lies. The paper became a strange mix of defiance and despair, the last voice of a man cornered by his own creation. By morning, hotel staff noticed he had not checked out. When they entered the room, the sight was chilling. Arjun's lifeless body lay on the bed, the note resting on the table nearby. News of his death spread quickly, shocking the same public that had followed every twist of his scandal. Some felt pity for the man who had crumbled under the weight of his crimes, while others saw his death as an act of cowardice, a refusal to face justice. For Sophie, the revelation was haunting. She had set the truth free, exposing his empire of fraud, but she could not have predicted that it would end this way. Her revenge had destroyed him completely, but it also left her carrying the burden of knowing she had lit the match that consumed his life. Arjun's story became a cautionary tale, retold in newspapers, television documentaries, and whispered conversations. It was a reminder of how ambition without limits can spiral into destruction, and how betrayal can cut deeper than any blade. In the end, a man who once seemed untouchable had died alone in a hotel room, leaving behind only scandal, shame, and unanswered questions.